There was certainly an element of making my grandfather proud and honouring him by taking part in the award.
But what if her most powerful message was never spoken at all? What if it was hidden, not in a public statement, not in a royal broadcast, not in a grand ceremony, but inside a private will, written for the people who truly knew her? Because according to multiple reports and royal commentators, when the Queen made her final personal choices, she didn't center them around the loudest royals or the most senior or even the ones closest to the spotlight. Instead, she reportedly passed something deeply personal, something tied to her most sacred refuge, to a young woman who has quietly lived her life away from drama, headlines, and attention. A young royal most people barely talk about, Lady Louise Windsor. And the inheritance wasn't just money or a symbolic token. It was tied to Balmoral, the place the Queen went to breathe, to escape, to feel normal, and the place where her story ended in September 2022. Now here's where it gets even more intense, because after the Queen's passing, the future of anything linked to Balmoral doesn't exist in a vacuum. Power shifts, priorities clash, and decisions can quietly change behind palace doors. Yet reports suggest that Prince William, the future king, stepped in to make sure the Queen's wish was respected and protected. And most shockingly, according to the same reporting and commentary, Queen Camilla was not part of that process. No guiding hand, no involvement, no visible role. And if you understand royal politics, you already know why that detail turns this from a simple inheritance story into something far bigger, something emotional, and frankly revealing. Because a will doesn't perform for the cameras. A will doesn't care about PR. A will tells the truth about love, trust, and who mattered most when no one was watching. So today, we're breaking down what Lady Louise is believed to have inherited, why it's a bigger deal than it sounds, what Prince William's involvement may signal, and what this entire situation suggests about the royal family's inner dynamics. But before we dive in, if you want stories like this explained clearly, with context, history, and the details most people miss, please subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel, and it means you won't miss what comes next, because this story has layers, and every layer changes the meaning. All right, let's get into it. To understand why this matters, you first have to understand one thing. Balmoral isn't just a castle. To the royal family, Balmoral is where the mask comes off. It's where the monarchy becomes a family, at least as close as they can get. Balmoral Castle sits in Aberdeenshire, Scotland, surrounded by vast stretches of wild countryside, moors, forests, and space, so quiet it almost feels unreal in a modern world. Every summer, the royal family traditionally goes there to step away from public pressure. No constant cameras, no daily ceremonies, no endless handshakes and forced smiles. At Balmoral, the royals aren't only royals, they're parents, children, grandparents. They walk, they rest, they eat together, they grieve there, they reflect there. And here's the crucial detail most people don't fully appreciate. Balmoral is not owned by the state. It's historically been part of the monarch's private ownership, meaning it is personal property, not a public asset. So if a monarch chooses to leave certain parts of that world to specific people through private arrangements, that choice can be deeply meaningful. Because you don't pass down pieces of your most private refuge to just anyone. That's not a casual gift. That is a message. According to reports and royal discussion around the Queen's private wishes, Lady Louise is believed to have inherited a cottage or residence connected to the Balmoral estate. Now, the exact name of the property is not always publicly confirmed in clear terms. Royal private arrangements are often protected from full public disclosure. But Balmoral is known to include several residences and lodges used by family and guests. And what matters isn't the square footage. It's what the gift represents. Owning or being granted a home on Balmoral grounds is like being handed a key to the most private chapter of royal life. It means access, not just physically, but emotionally. It means you're trusted with a place that holds family memories, unguarded moments, and personal history. And think about what that implies. Queen Elizabeth had many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She had senior royals around her. She had new power structures around her in her later years. And still, the story being discussed isn't she gave everything to the obvious people. It's that she made a personal, intimate choice. She chose Louise, and that's why so many people find this inheritance so revealing. Because a private will, more than any speech, can show where real affection and trust lived. If you're not deeply familiar with the royal family, Lady Louise Windsor can feel like a mystery. She's not a headline machine. She's not a scandal. She's not a controversy. She's quiet. And in a family where attention can be weaponized, that quietness is powerful. Lady Louise Alice Elizabeth Mary Mountbatten Windsor was born on November 8, 2003, and her early life wasn't the glossy fairy tale introduction people imagine when they hear royal baby. She was born premature through a difficult delivery. Her early years involved health concerns, and she underwent treatment for an eye condition when she was young. So from the beginning, her story had something the Queen deeply understood: a life that teaches you humility early, a life that doesn't start with perfect. Louise is the daughter of Prince Edward and Sophie, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, widely seen as among the more grounded, private members of the royal family. They've historically been less flashy, less theatrical, and far more protective of their children's normalcy. Louise grew up in that environment, more shielded, more stable, and away from the constant public storm. And here's something that matters a lot. When she had the option to adopt a more prominent royal styling, she remained publicly known as Lady Louise, not leaning into an hurt princess identity as a brand. She doesn't appear to chase celebrity. She doesn't flood social media. She doesn't build her life around attention. She studies, keeps her circle small, and is known for interests that feel, by royal standards, almost ordinary. And that ordinary quality is exactly what made her extraordinary in the eyes of two people who prized privacy above almost everything: Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, wasn't known for emotional displays. He was famously direct, private, and sometimes intimidating. But he had a special connection with Louise. One of the most touching details often mentioned by royal watchers is Philip's passion for carriage driving, something he enjoyed deeply, especially later in life. And Louise didn't just watch from the sidelines. She learned. Philip taught her. He shared time with her. He passed on a skill that wasn't about press coverage. It was about discipline, focus, tradition, and quiet joy. And after Philip's death in April 2021, Louise's tribute was widely remembered because it didn't look performative. It looked sincere. It looked like a granddaughter honoring a grandfather in the language he understood. Now imagine Queen Elizabeth watching that. A wife who spent decades beside Philip, a woman who knew what he valued, a monarch who knew how rare loyalty is when cameras are everywhere. If Louise represented continuity, dignity, and private devotion, then a personal gift makes emotional sense. Not because Louise is more important than others, but because Louise may have embodied something the Queen feared was disappearing: a royal who could serve without turning life into a spectacle. Now let's talk about the part that makes this story feel bigger than inheritance. Reports and commentary suggest Prince William took steps to ensure Louise's inheritance was respected. And here's why that matters. After Queen Elizabeth's passing, Balmoral's ownership and control moved with the crown, meaning the new monarch, King Charles, became the central figure connected to the estate. So if an arrangement involved a specific property or residence being set aside for a particular family member, it's easy to see why support from senior royals would matter in practice. And this is why William's role, even if largely behind the scenes, is meaningful. Because William isn't just a relative. William is the future king. When William supports something, it signals what kind of monarchy he wants to build and what values he wants to protect. And if you've watched William's life, one theme appears again and again. He has seen what happens when younger royals feel unsupported, unheard, or pushed to the edge. He watched the institution lose people. He watched public trust fracture. He watched the cost of internal pressure become global news. So it makes sense that William might view Louise as someone worth protecting, someone who stayed quiet, stayed loyal, stayed grounded. In a family where noise is often rewarded with attention, William backing a quiet royal can read like a message. We see you. We value you. You matter here. And for royal watchers, that's not small. That's a sign of what future leadership might look like. Now we reach the most sensitive part of the story, because it touches history, public perception, and the emotional legacy of the monarchy. Let's be careful and clear. Queen Camilla, as queen consort, holds an important public role. She represents the crown beside King Charles. But when people say she was not involved in this inheritance situation, they are usually talking about the personal sphere, the queen's private choices, her inner circle, and where trust lived. And this is where the past becomes impossible to ignore. Charles and Camilla's relationship began long before his marriage to Diana, and it later became one of the most defining controversies in modern royal history. The fallout, emotionally, culturally, and publicly, reshaped how millions viewed the monarchy. Queen Elizabeth valued duty, discipline, and loyalty. And while she always maintained public structure, many royal observers have long believed her private feelings were more complicated than official statements could ever admit. One moment that has often been pointed out is this. When Charles and Camilla married in 2005, the Queen did not attend the civil ceremony, though she did attend the reception later. And to many people, that absence became symbolic, whether intended or not. Because in royal life, symbolism is everything. So when a story emerges suggesting Camilla wasn't part of a sensitive inheritance discussion, especially one tied to Balmoral, the Queen's most personal refuge, people naturally ask, was that just practical?
Or did it reflect something deeper about boundaries, trust, and emotional distance? And that's why this story keeps spreading. Because it isn't only about property, it's about what a private choice may reveal. Here's the truth. Most inheritance stories are financial. This one feels emotional, because Balmoral wasn't just a location, it was the Queen's safe place. It was where she escaped the noise, where she was most herself, and she chose to connect that place to Louise, someone known for privacy, dignity, and quiet strength. If that's accurate, then the message is powerful. Not everything in the monarchy goes to the loudest. Not everything goes to the most senior. Sometimes, the most meaningful gifts go to the person who showed up quietly, consistently, lovingly, when it mattered most. And if Prince William really did help ensure that wish was respected, that adds another layer. A future king reinforcing an old queen's private values. That's not just family, that's a monarchy telling you what it wants to be. So the question becomes, was this Queen Elizabeth's final reminder that character matters more than image? Was it her way of saying, this is what loyalty looks like? Or was it simply a grandmother's private love letter to a granddaughter who never asked for attention but earned trust anyway? Either way, this is why people can't stop talking about it, because in a world of PR statements, a will can feel like the only place the truth is allowed to breathe. When King Charles became monarch, there was originally a plan to call Camilla Princess Consort. It was a softer title, a careful title, one designed to ease public reaction. But in February 2022, during the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, Queen Elizabeth made something clear. In a written message, she expressed her sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen Consort. It was a public endorsement, but it was also carefully timed, because in the United Kingdom, royal matters are rarely accidental. Now here's something important. Royal wills are sealed. In 2021, the High Court ruled that Prince Philip's will would remain private for at least 90 years. The same applies to Queen Elizabeth's will. So when people claim to know every detail inside it, that's not accurate. We don't know everything. What we understand comes from patterns, from behaviour, from who the Queen drew close in her final years, and those patterns matter. In her last chapter, Queen Elizabeth increasingly relied on Prince Edward and Sophie. After Harry and Meghan stepped back in 2020, Edward and Sophie took on more visible duties. They accompanied the Queen to events. They stepped forward quietly. Sophie, in particular, became one of Elizabeth's closest companions. The Queen even gifted her a personal brooch, a subtle but meaningful gesture of trust and affection. And within that family circle was Lady Louise. Louise never chased headlines. She never sold stories. She honoured her grandfather, Prince Philip, by continuing his passion for carriage driving. She showed up without drama. In a monarchy built on duty and discretion, that matters. Now step back for a moment. In February 2024, Buckingham Palace announced that King Charles III had been diagnosed with cancer. His schedule has since been carefully managed, and as a result, Prince William has stepped forward, not just as heir, but as a working pillar of the institution. He's not waiting to become king, he's already preparing. At the same time, the royal family has clearly shifted its inner circle. Prince Andrew has no public role. Prince Harry lives in California. The monarchy has drawn lines. After Harry and Meghan stepped back in 2020, Edward and Sophie took on more visible duties. They accompanied the Queen to events. They stepped forward quietly. Sophie, in particular, became one of Elizabeth's closest companions. The Queen even gifted her a personal brooch, a subtle but meaningful gesture of trust and affection. And within that family circle was Lady Louise. Louise never chased headlines. She never sold stories. She honoured her grandfather, Prince Philip, by continuing his passion for carriage driving. She showed up without drama. In a monarchy built on duty and discretion, that matters. Now step back for a moment. In February 2024, Buckingham Palace announced that King Charles III had been diagnosed with cancer. His schedule has since been carefully managed, and as a result, Prince William has stepped forward, not just as heir, but as a working pillar of the institution. He's not waiting to become king, he's already preparing. At the same time, the royal family has clearly shifted its inner circle. Prince Andrew has no public role. Prince Harry lives in California. The monarchy has drawn lines.